everybody. Today I am actually in a Kroger parking lot. So you can see right behind me, there's a Kroger grocery store. And that is not very exciting. But Kroger, by the way, is a very big grocery chain here and a lot of other places across the country. But I'm in this parking lot because I'm going to talk a little bit about the border here between Carmel and Zionsville but also some of the confusion that you might run into in a border like this. This isn't the only place, but there are some others around. So we're going to get into some of that in this video, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about where I am currently standing right now in Carmel, Indiana, or just across the street, or actually just a little bit north of this on the same side of the street, Zionsville, Indiana, or any of the northern suburbs, southern suburbs, east, west, or even Indianapolis, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about Carmel, Indiana, Zionsville, Indiana, all the cities and towns surrounding Indianapolis, and of course Indianapolis itself. So if you have questions at all about any of those areas, then make sure you reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. All right, so again today I am in a Kroger parking lot. And as I said, it's a big grocery chain here. You can find Krogers all over Indianapolis and all over the cities and towns surrounding Indianapolis for the most part. But there are some others too. You can have Whole Foods, you have Fresh Market, there's Aldi, you've got Trader Joe's, Needlers. Those are some of the other grocery chains you're going to find here. You can find some other smallish ones, but those are some of the bigger name that a lot of people are going to know across the country. And it's a very sunny day. It's actually very hot and super windy today. So if it sounds a little windy on the sound, I apologize for that, but I can't get myself out of the wind. But I am in this Kroger parking lot because I want to talk about this specific confusing border, but also some others that you might find, not just here in the northern suburbs, but some of the other suburbs that surround Indianapolis as well. So I am right along US 421, which is Michigan if you get south. I'm facing the south into Indianapolis, and this Kroger actually has a Carmel address, and 96th Street it's roughly a mile or so south of where I'm standing, something like that. I don't know for sure. I'd have to think about that and really dial that in, but it is just a little bit to the south, and that's generally the border between Carmel and Indianapolis. You cross that, you're in Carmel. Now, as you go up 421, you can generally think of Zionsville being on the west side of 421 and Carmel on the east side, but that's not always the case. So there's a gas station right over here where I'm looking. It's a Marathon gas station, has a Carmel address. This Kroger has a Carmel address, so they are on the east side of 421, makes sense. But then you go just on the other side of this Kroger, just to the north, and you have some restaurants and some shops with a Zionsville address. And then if you go across 421, I'm actually looking at several businesses over there that you would think on the western side of 421, they would have a Zionsville address, but they actually have a Carmel address. So obviously this border zigzags a little bit through this particular area. Now, if I'm looking just off this tree line, off to the east of me, there are neighborhoods, homes over there on that side. They all have a Carmel address. But if you go north on 421, still looking at this side, the east side of 421, you'll find other neighborhoods with a Carmel address, but you'll find some with a Zionsville address as you get further north especially. So again, it kind of zigzags through here. And it's something that if you are looking in this particular area and you want a specific address, you have to pay attention to what that neighborhood, what city, or in Zionsville's case, what town it's located in. Because of course that can have an effect on lots of things. It can have an effect on especially schools. It can have a tax implication, although that's not going to be really all that big. But the school implication would certainly be something that you want to keep in mind. The difference between, just as an example, Zionsville schools and Carmel schools, both exceptionally highly rated, but big difference in the size. There's less than 3,000 kids at Zionsville, more than 5,000 kids at Carmel. And if you live in this particular spot in very, very far southwestern Carmel, you're not exceptionally close to the high school here. But Zionsville, for the most part, anywhere you live, you're going to be reasonably close to the high school because Zionsville is just so much smaller. Now, if you were just on the other side of 421 or on this side of 421 and you were in Zionsville schools, you do have to get over there. You have to wind your way over to where the high school is, but still you're not looking at any more really than a 20-minute drive. At most, probably less than that, really. Carmel, depending on the traffic to the high school from here, could be a little bit longer drive. So definitely something to consider when you're looking at this area. But this isn't the only area where you can find some confusion like that. 146th Street on the north side of Carmel, so if you take 421 to the north and get to 146th Street, go east, you'll run right across pretty much the entire northern border of Carmel. But you'll notice some neighborhoods in there. On the north side, you should be in Westfield. South side of 146, you should be in Carmel, but it's not always the case. You might be on the north side of 146th Street with a Carmel address, but you're in Westfield schools. So you can have a lot of that zigzagging going right through there on that border. The border isn't as distinct as I guess we'd really, that is just something you have to contend with. If you go further to the east and you get between Carmel and Fishers or between Westfield and Noblesville, generally there you have the White River to contend with. So not a huge river at all. It's actually quite shallow, and really you can't have any large boats or anything like that going down the river. You can kayak or boat or something like that pretty easily in the White River, but super shallow. Not necessarily a major river like the Mississippi or the Ohio or something along those lines, but you have to cross it, and you can only cross it in certain areas with some major bridges like at 146th Street, 116th, 96, any of those going through north of 146th Street, you can get across it at, let's say, State Road 32, something like that. But that is a pretty definitive border between Carmel and Fishers, and also between Westfield and Noblesville. And actually there's a little space off of the river too, because when you have a river, usually you've got a little floodplain that goes off of the river and you don't find a whole lot built on it. So it is kind of this buffer between the cities. And it's pretty easy to tell a lot of times when you're crossing from one to the other. But here, this can be ultra confusing, and there aren't a whole lot of signs to tell you that you're going from one to the other. You may see a sign here or there that says, "Welcome to Zionsville," or "Welcome to Carmel," something like that, or "Carmel City Limits," something along those lines on a sign, but nothing that's gonna be an absolute distinction that I have crossed from one thing to the other. So when you're looking across these suburbs, you just have to keep some of those things in mind when you're looking at the edges. And a lot of people especially run into that situation along 146th Street where they see it's a Carmel address, but it's Westfield schools. That seems really weird. Why is that? That along just that corridor is actually, I wouldn't call it common, but it's certainly something that we see often, definitely. So keep that in mind when you're looking at places like this. Any border between two cities, even in Indianapolis, it can happen as well. You get to the southern portion of Carmel and you can have an Indianapolis address, but still be in Carmel schools. So that is absolutely probably a little bit more confusing than even when you go on the north side of Carmel and you're in Westfield schools, something along those lines. So you can have that happen over in Brownsburg, just as an example, further to the south and the west of here. If you are in Indianapolis, you could still be in Brownsburg schools, just somewhere along that edge. And there's no definitive way to really see a border to figure out where you are absolutely. So it can be confusing, and there are other points and other places around the city where that can happen too. So if you are looking for a place and you absolutely have to be within a certain school system, like you wanted to be in Brownsburg schools, you can still consider an Indianapolis address in some cases. If you wanted to be in Westfield schools, you could still consider a Carmel address in some cases. So keeping that in mind is something that can help lessen the restriction, I would say, on sometimes your search for a home. You can keep it open a little bit more. Instead of looking for just Westfield homes, you can add Carmel in there or look for Westfield schools and you'll see some Carmel addresses pop up. Or look for Brownsburg schools and you'll see some Indianapolis addresses come up. Look for Carmel schools and you'll see some Indianapolis addresses come up. So it's a little bit strange with some of the fuzzy borders that we see. So if you have questions about any of these confusing borders or the minor confusion you might run into with any of these borders, then reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.